This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, I want to talk about Kanye West and his interview with President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and how the media, the mainstream media, the Orwellian media, hypocritically ripped him to shreds for, quote, being mentally ill or having a mental problem. Now, this is so outrageous that it needs to be said, and I haven't heard anybody talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it, because this is, first of all, we're talking about truth. Second of all, we're talking about not the manufactured self-victimization that so often is celebrated in our nation for some kind of social agenda or political agenda. We're talking about a guy Kanye West, who got legitimately attacked, victimized in a way that it would be the equivalent, and I know this is going to be offensive to people, so I got to be careful what I'm about to say. But everybody who has a sound conscience and a right mind would be horrified if certain words were used towards African Americans that used to be acceptable words like 30 years ago, okay? And they're not acceptable. It doesn't matter if some hip-hop or rap group decides to use those words within their own culture. It's not my culture. I mean, if their culture accepts it, I think it's demeaning to their own culture, but it's not my culture, okay? It's outrageous if certain ethnic groups or religious groups were called names like they were called 30, 40 years ago. It's outrageous. It's unacceptable. You know, it's unacceptable, for example, for people to dress in white robes and burn crosses and call themselves Christians because they're members of the KKK. There's no justification of that. And there's no justification of when Christians get attacked and insulted and demeaned by the culture, as they have been, or conservatives have been. There's no justification for calling white people names from certain socioeconomic groups. For example, among the globalist elite politicians in our nation, it is acceptable to them and the mainstream media, who is totally disconnected from, let's just say, white people of certain socioeconomic groups and certain geographic locations. It's okay in the media. It's okay for certain politicians to call these white people the deplorables. Calling people the deplorables, if you dared to use that kind of demeaning, put-down vocabulary towards African Americans or towards Jews or any other group, there would be outrage. The fact that a presidential candidate with contempt in her voice, with total contempt in her voice, put down all the people who were legally expressing their opinions, their values, by choosing to vote for President Donald Trump, who won the election fair and square, by the way, and this woman lost. Well, one of the reasons she lost is if you're running for political office, you should have the common sense. She made a remark the other day, which was just so indicative of a internal insanity. She said that Judge Kavanaugh, and this is a talking point that a lot of liberals use, he didn't display the temperament that is necessary for a Supreme Court judge. What kind of hogwash is that? The man was defending himself against outrageous accusations, and accusations that had no corroborative facts to back him up. That's the bottom line. It just wasn't that he was accused of stuff. His accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who we're going to talk about in a minute. Her background, by the way, this is what she specializes in. When she's not, you think what you saw when Dr. Christine Blasey Ford went up there to testify, do you think that's the way she looks like in real life? With the greasy, disheveled hair, with the oversized glasses that just don't work. You think that's how she acts in her normal life? Man, you were bamboozled. You were conned. You were fooled. They scrubbed the internet of pictures of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford is not some victim loser, okay? She's a sharp and powerful woman. That's who she is. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, whether you like her or not, is a sharp, powerful woman. She doesn't go around with the disheveled, greasy hair and the odd, oversized glasses that she decided to wear when she was testifying. That's not how that was an act. That was and speaking like a little girl who had been victimized, she spoke from her throat. Notice, both men and women, that when she spoke, she didn't speak naturally. She didn't speak from her stomach frame or even her lower throat frame. She spoke out of like her Adam's apple. That was a deliberate, actors learn how to do that. See, when I first came to Hollywood, I was in the feature film business. I was an independent feature film producer who produced a number of science fiction feature films seen in theaters all around the world. My wife was a professional actress in Hollywood. Okay, she studied with, she won a scholarship to Juilliard. She studied with some of the most important acting coaches in the business. And I'm not going to drop names, but these were people that were star makers, okay? And she would share with me what went on in these acting classes, and they were taught everything like when you speak, depending upon what kind of role you're playing, how you can change your voice, how you can make your voice more powerful or more weak or victim-like. Now, for example, a man, I meet men all the time, I'm not putting them down, nobody ever coached them how to speak. And so they give away their power, they give away their manhood in life because nobody has ever coached them about how to speak. You see, a lot of men speak from their upper throat. And if your upper throat becomes your voice box, so to speak, you're going to have a more high-pitched, feminine tone to your voice. Okay? No, that's not sexist. You're giving away your masculine power. Whereas if you speak like this, see, right now you're not in the studio with me, but you can hear my stomach vibrating, and I'm not speaking from my throat, I'm speaking from my chest, and I don't want to speak real loud, but I can speak from my belly and chest. Think of a bass loudspeaker, like you got a stereo set or something, a woofer. You got a sound system for your big screen or something, or for your music, and there's always one speaker that's larger and heavier than the others. That's your woofer. That's your bass speaker. That's what's going to carry the vibration, heavy, deep vibrational sounds. That's what's going to carry the deep voices and the bass guitar and stuff. Okay. The diaphragm is bigger and heavier. So your voice is like an audio speaker if you know how to use it. And if you speak from your stomach area, diaphragm, and your lower chest, you can boom. You can turn up the bass on any voice. A female can do that. I've seen females do it intuitively when they want to assert authority. They'll speak more from their stomach diaphragm area. Okay, so Blasey Ford, if you were paying attention, and you should be paying attention, because how many Paul McGuire Report programs have we done on perception and how you can raise your perception, and how raising your perception, your ability to perceive accurately what's going on around you, how by raising your perception, and we taught you how to do that, how you can deliberately and easily raise your perception where all of these things that I'm talking about now are not obscure subjects that you didn't notice but because you practice what we taught on the program about raising your perception, which essentially means you're increasing the amount of information that you're able to see through your eyes, what you can hear, your tactile senses, what you can feel, what you can smell. These are your senses that God has given you. Every one of your senses provide a rich source of information. And the more you're able to dial up the intensity of each one of your senses and increase your perception, the more information, the more knowledge, and thus the more powerful an individual you become. What does that mean in practical terms? It means this. When you see somebody like a Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, you don't have this deer caught in the headlights, gaze that a lot of conservatives, your average American has, and unfortunately your evangelical Christian has. So like they stare at the hearings in a daze and they repeat, whatever the media told them to think, that's what they think. If your perception was working the way God downloaded it in you, you would have picked up immediately the fact that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was speaking from the tiny part of her throat in a very high-pitched voice that sounded like a young girl, prepubescent girl. That was done intentionally. Okay, that was done intentionally because she's a very, very powerful, intelligent woman. And so she was coached by the best before she did her testimony. You got it? She didn't walk up there naturally. And anybody whose perception is dialed down and thinks that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford just went up there naturally, you're a fool. You don't know how to use your perception that God gave you. Knowledge is power. She did it on purpose so she could convince people that she truly was a helpless victim that got messed up for life by what happened. I can see some of you saying, Paul, you're cruel. I'm going to repeat this in case it didn't come across through the editing, but I'm not cruel. I'm known as a person who believes in people's stories, as a professor of Bible prophecy and eschatology and emotional healing at a major Christian university and school of theology. I taught classes on emotional healing. I prayed for and counseled hundreds of men and women who were sexually abused, emotionally abused, psychologically abused as young kids, infants, and people trusted me always. Why did they trust me? Because they knew I was a safe space. They knew I wouldn't doubt their story. And I prayed for people, and they would weep and sob. They'd be delivered, and they trusted me and opened up their soul to me because I had a reputation for believing them. And the biggest complaint I would hear is that nobody believes me. Nobody believes me that my father, who was an elder in this born-again church, molested me when I was 3, and on and on. Men would tell me stories too. So I'm known. My track record and bio, I'm known as someone who's compassionate, caring, and who believes people, and who can be trusted because I won't violate what you said to me privately. So don't write me off without knowing who I am. But at the same time, I will say this, and I'm almost not saying it because it's politically correct and it's become a cliche. But I will say this. I will say, most likely, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was sexually molested in whatever way. That's most likely part of her life story. But the problem is, it wasn't Kavanaugh who did it. And when then you study her background, okay, this is a very brilliant woman. In my research just today, I spent hours reading the scientific, psychological, and medical reports that she wrote along with other psychologists and doctors at, for example, the University of Stanford Medical School, at other prestigious universities and schools. She has written numerous papers. I've read a number of those papers where she was one of the authors. And these papers were on the usage of hypnosis, yoga, small groups, and meditation, and specifically hypnosis, were to use hypnosis as a way to retrieve, this is an exact quote, using hypnosis to retrieve important memories, and then using hypnosis to create memories. Did you hear what I said? Using hypnosis to create artificial memories. Think about that. That's her area of expertise, plus her alleged CIA connections with CIA mind control and MK Ultra. This is not some woman who walked off the street in a daze, okay? She trains people in self-hypnosis and group hypnosis, where you can retrieve buried, suppressed, unconscious memories like trauma and rape that you may have suppressed to protect yourself. And she trains people in the use of hypnosis to create and embed in your mind artificial memories, completely manufactured memories. Now, the research paper says this is all for the benefit of psychological healing. And I'm sure that in both cases, it can be beneficial in psychological healing. But here's the problem. You are, and this is what the accusations were all about over the internet, her alleged connection with CIA mind control. You have to understand scientific mind control and how it works. And if you don't understand it, it's way too late. I mean, I'm sorry, it's not too late, but it's way late in the day. You need to learn it as fast as you can, because this is a modern science which is part of our everyday life. And the only reason you wouldn't know it's part of your everyday life is because you're not educated, and you can get educated. Knowledge is power if you will read on it. Get my book, Conquering the Matrix. It will tell you if you're under the influence of mind control, if you're in some kind of very subtle hypnotic state, if you've been exposed to mind programming, hypnosis, without realizing it. That's what Conquering the Matrix will teach you. It will explain everything I just said. And then Conquering the Matrix will also show how you can deprogram yourself and your children from these hypnotic mind control states. Okay? But you've got to understand it. It's written in easy to read language. And then if you want to know how mind control works on a mass level, a national level, then read my book, Mass Awakening, where it talks about, from the very quotes of the elite, how they plan to use mass hypnosis and mass scientific mind control to program entire populations. You need to know about that. And finally, you need to get my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America. Why? Because it talks about how in 1947, the CIA, under the orders of Rockefeller — why was Rockefeller ordering the CIA around? Well, because Rockefeller chose the director of the CIA, Allen Dulles. And under Allen Dulles and Rockefeller and the CIA, they had a secret program where they smuggled into the United States of America over 10,000 Nazi scientists after World War II. They smuggled into America 10,000 Nazi scientists. And what was the specialties of these 10,000 Nazi scientists that the CIA smuggled in under what was called, I'm having a mental blank, Operation Paperclip. That was the CIA code name. What was their specialty, the Nazi scientists? They were mind control scientists. Yeah, I'll say it again. Mind control scientists. And they were rocket scientists. Mind control as in MK Ultra programming, Manchurian Candidate programming. The stuff that the Bourne Identity movies are written about. The stuff that the what was it called, Red Sparrow with Nicole Kidman. The Russian MK Ultra program, This is real stuff, folks. It's not fictional novel stuff. And so these Nazi rocket scientists went to Stanford University. They went to other major think tanks, universities, hospitals. They went to the most prestigious research institutes in the United States of America. They had their names changed. They became the heads of these laboratories and schools, and they had like unlimited funding. And they went hardcore in the 50s, the entire 1950s generation, 1950 to 1960, and afterwards. I think it didn't stop until 1970, and some people wonder if it's still going on. There were thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of young little boys and girls who disappeared for a time, who disappeared permanently, who somehow were subjected to the Nazi MK Ultra mind control programming. And this is the generation of the 50s and the 60s and the early 70s. Huge numbers. And they were programmed in the most horrific ways for all kinds of things. That's what the Manchurian Candidate movies are all about. And the Bourne Identity, etc. Okay, so Dr. Blasey Ford, I don't want to go into a debate on the facts, but I'll say this to you. The mainstream media, and I'm writing an article about this, and it'll be included in a new book I'm doing. You can read the article for free at paulmcguire.us, but the point is that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, supposedly, I'll say allegedly, family members like her father and other people in her family were connected to, at the very least, some of these mind control programs with certain universities. And don't think that's so crazy, because Stanford University publicly admitted that they were involved in CIA, MK Ultra mind control activities, where they gave the author Ken Kesey LSD and many other writers. Grateful Dead was part of that program, not from Stanford, but from an offshoot. So this stuff is real. So Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, you can play around with terminology, but there's a fine line, if no line at all, between programming, self-hypnosis, and mind control. Remember, the basic formula of scientific mind control is pain, drugs like LSD, and hypnosis. Let me say it again. Pain, which can be stress, shock, psychological pain. Drugs like LSD, it amplifies the experience. And hypnosis. And you can program people because they work synergistically to create a hypnotic state. And all mind control is built upon the premise that you bypass the rational conscious mind and you program the subconscious mind. But in order to do that, you have to create, through a number of variables, what's called a hypnotic state, or more commonly called a trance state. A trance state is the doorway into the subconscious, which can be programmed. Now, this is a science. Scientific mind control is every bit of science as biology or computer science or genetic science or quantum physics. It's on that high of a level. And so, pain, physical pain, shock, rape, trauma, stress, extreme stress, psychological pain, what that does is that causes the mind to begin to morph into a hypnotic state. You amplify the pain part of the formula through the use of the most powerful psychedelic drugs known to man, such as LSD. That's like a force multiplier. That takes whatever existing pain or stress or shock a person is experiencing, and then you have them take LSD, and it amplifies it by 1,000-fold, thus further accelerating and opening a portal, if you will, to the subconscious mind. Then hypnosis consists of a variety of techniques. It can be verbal words, it can be symbols, it can be any kind of information where you literally utter commands or instructions, or you program the subconscious mind like a computer deep inside an individual on the subconscious level, to do things, to remember things, to act things out. Everything from being an assassin, a Manchurian candidate, or what they call a beta kitten sex slave, or multiple personalities. And then, after the hypnotic state and the drugs and the hypnosis and the pain, you can activate through a hypnotic command. It could be a symbol, it could be a musical tune, it could be a phrase from a movie, it could be somebody waving a red flag or a blue flag. It could be any number of symbols. That will provide the trigger mechanism for the person who has a deeply embedded, could be an entire personality they've recreated, or an assignment they've recreated. That alter ego, that alter personality that they've programmed deep in their subconscious, the command, like to assassinate somebody or do whatever, can be triggered with a cell phone call, or a particular pitch of a note, or a ultra high frequency silent sound, or any number of things. And then they have people who watch when it's sophisticated MK Ultra mind control. These people have handlers, people who know how to work with what they call MK Ultra slaves, mind control slaves. And the handler makes sure that the person who has been programmed stays in the programming state of consciousness and doesn't have relationships or wander away too far and get into things which would surface the reality that they've been secretly programmed. So they have handlers. Now, I'll be careful with what I'm saying, but I was watching, well, I'll say this in the abstract, and you're smart enough to connect the dots. Let's just say what I'm now about to share with you is a fairy tale that I wrote. Okay, so here's the fairy tale. Once upon a time, I was turning on the television. I saw a bunch of people in the room and somebody talking. I looked at the person talking, and I instantly knew within 3 seconds that this person had been subjected to some form of MK Ultra mind control. I knew it. I told somebody that I knew who was watching this group of people talk live. They said, "How could you possibly know that? You don't know anything about this person." I said, "I know because I've studied this stuff, and people who have been programmed or exposed to MK Ultra always leave signatures in their personality, their eyes, their facial mannerisms, etc., etc. They always leave clues or signatures. You just have to be able to perceive it." Now, that was the end of the conversation. The media said nothing. I said nothing for various reasons. Continued to say nothing. Then reports began to surface on the internet that this particular person that I instantly knew had been exposed to MK Ultra. There was a high likelihood that because of this person's family background and life experiences, that they had been exposed to MK Ultra. So what I recognized in 3 seconds turned out to be a factual reality. This isn't the first time, by the way, that this has happened. This has happened continually. Does that mean I walk in a paranoid state? No. It's just when you've dialed up your perception, which you can do, anytime you want to start doing it, you can do it. And you research this particular topic, you can see the signatures, you can see the clues. When you look at people carefully, their life experience, the goodness in them, the evilness in them, everything that they're hiding, is relatively transparent. It shows through the eyes. It shows through the musculature of the face, the tone of voice, the body language. And so you can recognize it rather quickly. I could hold up before you, and we're still talking about a fairy tale, okay? We're still in a fairy tale. I could hold up before you pictures of very, very wealthy, very, very powerful people in this nation, okay, that are household names. And you look at their eyes, you look at the musculature of their face, and then I can hold up to you pictures of people that I would say have gone through MK Ultra mind control programming. And if you put their faces side by side, you'll see the same dilation of the pupils, the same size of the pupils, the same way the eyes are focused. Just by looking at the eyes, I could write a 2-page essay on all the things you can see in the eyes, not to mention the musculature of the face and the body language and what the face is projecting. Now, I'll leave the rest for you to figure out in the fairy tale. In any case, we're out of the fairy tale, now commenting on real life. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, she had no memory of any specifics that corroborated her allegation that Kavanaugh had molested her in some way. And they say, well, that's common with trauma victims. Well, yeah, sometimes it is common with trauma victims. But there was far more to her story that you never heard in the mainstream media, and including the so-called conservative mainstream media. Total censorship, total media blackout on the entire topic. Why? Well, you know why. Then when you did research it on the internet, there were almost no stories. I looked it up very quickly. There was no information. Then the information began to come out. But then there were very few websites that were allowed to publish it. And it was accompanied with a blitz of this kind of these fake news, fact check alerts. So you'd have a news story regarding Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's background in mind control, and then you'd have 4 stories above it all saying fact check, fake news, and 4 stories below it all saying fact check and fake news. And so that, and still very few articles percentage-wise discussing all the allegations of the relationship between her and CIA mind control. Now, if you look it up, you'll see millions of articles discussing her and CIA and mind control. What changed? What changed was Kavanaugh was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice. And therefore, there was no reason to continue the disinformation campaign. See how that works? How the entire media can be rigged? They're under an Orwellian control system along with the tech giants. One massive control system. Okay, so everybody was so upset and treated Dr. Christine Blasey Ford because of her victimization, which I'm not doubting she was victimized, by the way. But they treated her and her frailties and her peculiarities, which she had many. Her asking for the caffeine. I mean, she acted very, very odd. But that was all excusable. They totally accepted her, you see, because she was performing the agenda they wanted to accomplish. Okay, now, then we have Kanye West, a billionaire, an entrepreneur, but he's from the streets. And so he doesn't speak in the vocabulary of a white man, necessarily. And he speaks with a stream of consciousness style, which I would characterize as multidimensional. So I saw all of the media, not all, almost all of the media, viciously and ruthlessly attacked Kanye West, accusing him of being mentally ill, and that saying he can't talk right because he's mentally ill. Viciously, like dogs with rabies, like dogs that have been starved to death and lust for human flesh. The media, both men and women, pounced upon him while he was in the White House, accusing Kanye West, a billionaire entrepreneur, of being mentally ill, of having a mental problem, and he couldn't talk properly. And I'm here to tell you that I am outraged and indignant, and I find the behavior of the corrupt media in America, this Orwellian media, not only dishonest, lying, but they lack conscience, principle, fair-mindedness, and virtue of any kind. They are prostitutes, except a prostitute normally has to be a prostitute because of the way life has dealt them. These people volunteer to be prostitutes. They know they're lying. And I'm talking about people that some of your friends like, certain television networks. They're looked on as heroes. They're not heroes. I could name the names of all these big-time television newscasters that ripped him to shreds, Kanye West. And I'm here to defend them. I'm not a Kanye West fan. I can't even tell you what music he's performed. I know his name. I've heard of his name for years. Do I know his music? No. This is about fairness. This is about standing up for a guy who was tarred and feathered because he wasn't politically correct. But I'm going to go further than that. The things they accused him of were lies. In fact, the exact opposite is true. They accused Kanye West of being mentally deficient, having a mental illness, couldn't speak right because of his mental illness. I have printed out and analyzed his statements, and I hope somebody listening to me, the Paul McGuire Report, I know there's people listening that you have a connection with Kanye West, and you could get this program to him. And I would appreciate it if you would go to paulmcguire.us, and if you need to, lift the part of the program where I talk about him, because he's probably a busy guy. But I want him to hear this. I really do. Because I want him to hear the truth. He already knows the truth, but I want him to hear the truth about the people that tried to make him less than what God created him as. And some of you know Kanye West, and you know how to get to him. And whether you want to put it on a thumb drive, explain it in an introduction, because he probably gets millions of fan mail, and tell him how many seconds to go into the program. But I'd like him to hear a person's analysis of what he said, and that I categorize it on the genius level. In fact, everything that I read that he said, to me, tells me that this man's IQ, his intellect, his brain power is so far beyond that of the normal person. He's like his intellect is like an eagle that soars above these chickens squawking on the ground. These Orwellian media people. That Kanye West, in my opinion, has a genius. A super genius intellect. And I'm going to explain why. Okay, so I have a printout of what he said to President Trump in the Oval Office. And he was with Jim Brown, the famous athlete. And first of all, I noticed that when Kanye West spoke to President Trump, he, by memory, knew economic data, and he didn't have to have notes. And I can tell you this, as a guy who's been on the biggest cable network, debating economic issues as my specialty with the big economic publishers and editors of all the big economic newspapers and magazines and economists. That's the main group I would debate. And I had to study my tail off and memorize the facts. I can tell you that a lot of these people don't know what they're talking about. Some of them do, but not all of them do. And I can tell you very few, like Kanye West, can just off the top of his head talk about, for example, Wisconsin, and then rattle off statistics like 4,000 jobs, people making $50,000 a year at the Ford plant. He knows it in his head. That tells me he's very, very brilliant. Now, he doesn't talk like a white guy, all right? That should be a no-brainer discussion. We have what's called an IQ test in the United States. I forgot when IQ tests began. But IQ tests were discovered decades ago as being completely faulty regarding many kinds of people, especially those people that would be considered minorities, because the IQ test was challenged. The critics, rightfully so, said the IQ test is based on a white person's vocabulary and how they would speak in a white neighborhood. Now, if an African-American kid doesn't know the words that white kids say in a white neighborhood, it doesn't mean that the African-American kid's stupid. It just means he uses a different vocabulary. Well, we have the same problem here. These people are tearing apart Kanye West, just tearing him apart, because he's not speaking like a white person. Well, let me tell you something. I've been on, again, debating the biggest economic experts on a lot of big cable news networks. They talked intelligently as white people, and that's the officially sanctioned language. I'm white. But it doesn't mean they knew what they were talking about. This guy, Kanye West, doesn't speak like a white person, but he's far more perceptive and intelligent and has a far deeper grasp of many issues than all the media people attacking him, the vultures. So let me read you what Kanye West says. First of all, this was a highly perceptive remark. He's talking to President Trump, okay? And this is what he says. This is Kanye West. Well, we're going to have Apple, an American company, work on this plane with, but you know what I don't like about it? It's not that I don't like. What I need Saturday Night Live to improve on, or what I need the liberals to improve on is, if he don't look good, we don't look good. This is our president. And President Donald Trump says, it's true. Okay, this is what you got to understand. Kanye West, seemingly flying by the seat of his pants, grasps an extremely complex, yet it should be obvious, truth in the area of branding. I'm talking about deep branding. I'm not talking about pigeon brain, pigeon IQ branding. I'm talking about deep branding. Kanye West has a consciousness of what deep branding is all about. And he makes this powerful statement, which reflects intellectual firepower far superior to that of his critics. What he's saying is of truth. He's saying, see, he's talking about branding, and then he says, he's trying to be positive towards the liberals. So he says, what I need the liberals to improve on is, listen carefully, if he don't look good, we don't look good. This is our president. And what Kanye West means by that is if he don't look good, he's talking about President Trump. So he's saying if President Trump doesn't look good, we don't look good. This is our president. So Kanye West is trying to communicate this powerful truth that in terms of branding, if you're talking about America's economic power and respect throughout the world, if we in America don't back our president, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, and if we in America don't make our president look good by standing behind him, he's saying, then we don't look good. Okay? Which means our Apple phones, our Ford cars, all these American companies, American society, everything that America is manufacturing and trying to sell, there's a spillover effect. If we are insulting and tearing our president down, and we're not making him look good, guess what? It reflects on everything America does in terms of produces, invents. It taints it. So he uses street language to explain a very sophisticated branding concept, which is simply this. If we don't make our president look good by watching his back, then guess what? The world isn't going to respect. They're not going to buy. They're not going to like our inventions, our technology, and our products. What Kanye West is saying to the liberals, if you smarten up, okay, like get your act together. We're all in this together. We're a team. So we got to make our president look good, because if we make our president look bad, we end up looking bad. And guess what? Nobody's going to buy our products and services. That's what he's saying. This man's not an idiot. He understands marketing, merchandising, advertising better than any expert I've ever heard of. He gets it. Okay, and the president obviously gets it. Now, again, Kanye West, I'm quoting him. The media is tearing this guy up, calling him an idiot, calling him mentally ill. They don't have a clue what he's talking about. He's talking so far above their IQ level, it breaks the sound barrier in the heads of the moron drone robot journalists. Okay, here's Kanye West, quote, "He has to be the freshest, the flyest planes, the best factories, and we have to make our core be in power. We have to bring jobs into America, because our best export is entertainment and ideas. But when we make everything in China and not in America, then we're cheating on our country. We're putting people in positions to have to do illegal things to end up in the cheapest factory ever, the prison system." Now, let me break this down for you, because this guy understands more of what's going on than any of these people on TV, any of these people writing these editorials, and any of the politicians. He gets it. This guy is genius brain power. Do you understand that? I'm not trying to be nice. I'm giving you an accurate analysis of the level of Kanye West's intellect. It's way, way above his critics. And don't confuse the fact that he speaks in like a street talk. You know, just because some white guy speaks in white language, in a white style, doesn't mean he has a clue of that he knows what he's talking about. He's speaking in street style, but don't let that fool you. There's more intelligence in his street style than in 90% I hear of what white experts talk about, especially on the news network channels. This is what he's saying. He has to be the freshest. Well, who is he talking about when he says he, the freshest? Now, I'm not from the ghetto. I'm not going to pretend I'm from the ghetto. I'm not from any hood. I'm not going to pretend I'm from the hood. I grew up in Jackson Heights, Queens, predominantly white. It is what it is, okay? But I don't need a translator to figure out what Kanye West is saying. When he says he has to be the freshest, he's talking about President Trump again, because he understands the relationship of President Donald Trump as a global brand name for the selling of American products, entertainment, and industry, and American products and industry. So he's repeating his theme in this second sentence. He has to be the freshest. Okay, President Trump. And then he's talking about President Trump. The flyest, which is obviously a hip term for, he's flying, he's up there, he's happening. That's a bad white man's translation of what Kanye West is saying, but that's what he's saying. The flyest planes, the best factories. And then Kanye West says, and we have to make our core be in power. What he's saying is this should be a Harvard or Yale School of Economics lecture, but you got a bunch of Marxist idiots who are the professors of these Ivy League schools. This guy understands capitalism. Okay, he should be teaching at Harvard or Yale or in some high-level economics school. He should be teaching because he gets it. He's not stuck in Marxist philosophy that didn't work 200 years ago and doesn't work today. He's saying the core of what we're about. He's talking about economics. The core of what we're all about is we have to bring jobs into America. See, he gets it. The Democrats don't get it. Most of the Republicans don't get it. We have to bring jobs into America. He explains why. Because our best export is entertainment and ideas. Do you understand that Kanye West gets it? Entertainment and ideas that go over the top can only originate in America because it's only America that has a Judeo-Christian foundation. It's only America that allows the freedom, to whatever degree, for somebody's intellect to soar. Because to whatever degree, we still have freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and other constitutional rights and freedoms are still allowable. We're not programmed totally in America. We're not like China or Russia, where they think in a box. That's why they can't produce entertainment and ideas that the world wants. Kanye West gets it. And then he gets this. He says, but when we make everything in China and not in America, then we're cheating our country. Simple economics. We're putting people in positions to have to do illegal things, to end up in a cheapest factory ever, the prison system. You will never hear on a white-dominated network, including CNN and MSNBC and all the rest of those channels, you'll never hear an expose of the concept that the prison system is the cheapest factory system there is. That's a hidden, dirty secret. Our prison systems in the United States of America have essentially become a way, you see, arresting people, you target minorities, you throw them in prisons, because then you can justify paying them slave labor prison wages. The prison systems are largely a scam to exploit minorities by paying them slave wages in a prison system which is in reality a factory system. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's because you haven't done your homework. We have so many products being made in America, and the reason we make them in America with competitive prices is you'll never see this in the media, you'll never hear it discussed, is because we have a massive prison population working day and night to produce at slave labor prices, products and services. It's a dirty secret, but it's real. He gets it. Now, I want to say a few more things. We're going to have to pick up on number 2 of this. Okay. Now, here, Jim Brown repeats what Kanye West said. If he doesn't look good, we don't look good. President Trump, great, right? Isn't that a great statement? Jim Brown, yes, it is. President Trump, and it's so true. Jim Brown, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so this is President Trump. I want to say it's great to have you guys here, and we're going to go and we're going to have some lunch. That was quite something. Kanye West. It was from the soul. I just channeled it. Kanye West isn't nuts. When he says it was from the soul, I just channeled it, he wasn't saying he was in the occult in the New Age, as some idiot Christian would falsely come up with that conclusion. That's not what he meant. Kanye West was simply saying, I'm kind of translating. What he was saying, what he meant by it's from the soul, I just channeled it, was I'm speaking from the heart, like Trump speaks from the heart. I'm not putting it through a filter. I'm just telling you like it is. And it was deep and powerful. And the president got it. Now listen to what else Kanye West says. I think we need to care about all people. So this guy's got a good heart. And I believe that when I went on NBC, I was very emotional and I was programmed to think from a victimized mentality. Okay? Kanye West is admitting that, like all Americans, he has been programmed to think a certain way. And the reality is most African Americans, whites have been programmed to think one way. African Americans have been programmed to think through the programming called victimization. Because victimization allows the globalist elite to enslave the African Americans. In the same way, dividing the races, like black and white and stuff and Hispanic, allows the globalist elite to control the masses. Whenever you can program people to believe they're victims, whether it's white, African American, Hispanic, or whatever, you own them. They're your slaves. And Kanye West gets it. Okay? He's admitting he had a welfare mentality. And then Kanye West says, I think that with blacks and African Americans, we really get caught up in the idea of racism over the idea of industry. Did you hear what he said? This is breakthrough thinking. He said, as blacks and African Americans, we get caught up in the idea of racism over the idea of industry. He is saying exactly what the globalist elite and the plantation owners do not want African Americans to understand. Does that sound condescending? Well, it's too bad it's true. He wants them, the plantation owners, the globalist elite, want African Americans. That's why they keep raising up these African American heroes that perpetuate the victimization mentality. Okay? The civil rights leaders, the current ones, it's all about victimization. That's a communist strategy. Organize the discontent. Get the people focused on victimization, and then you can dominate, control, and exploit them, and they'll never be free. So the black people in America, to a large degree, have been seduced by this victimization, and Kanye West is breaking that programming. He's saying they need to think instead of racism. Say racism obsessed. As long as you're racism focused, you can't be free. You need to be industry focused. Kanye West is telling his own people that you need to begin to focus in on what's possible, what you can manufacture, what you can do, what your resources are, what your gifts and talents are, and then you can fly. Simple principle, but this guy's on it. You see, he's breaking their programming, and that's why the white media hates him, because he's breaking the chains off his brothers and sisters. You understand what I'm saying? He's breaking the psychological chains off them by getting them to think in a more biblical, powerful way, even though he doesn't use the word biblical. Now, listen to what else Kanye West says. This is profound, man. This is like, will blow your mind. A welfare mentality. He's speaking against it. A racism mentality. Then Kanye West says, we say if people don't have land, they settle for brands. I want to read that to you again, because this is what it's about in white America too, and Hispanic America. Kanye West is saying something so profound in terms of merchandising, advertising, branding. He gets it. He's saying, we say, I guess he's talking about certain African American people, we say if people don't have land, they settle for brands. What he's saying is, if people don't have real wealth, like land that they can own, like land you can pass on to your kids and grandchildren, Kanye West saying if people don't have the right to own land, remember in all communist socialist societies, you don't have the right to own land. You don't have the right to own anything. You're a prisoner. Kanye West is breaking that. He's saying of the African Americans, but it applies to the whites. If you can't own land, if you can't have your own place to live and own it free and clear, then the system will manipulate you. That's what he's saying, to settle for brands. Let me break that down. So, because what you really should be doing if you had power is owning land free and clear, owning your own home free and clear. That's power, economic power. But since you don't have that, you're being mind controlled into settling for brands. And brands is a phony sense of power. You know, you have the Nike thing, just do it, the little label, the labels and the symbols of certain shirts and clothing, the hipper brand names. Women have it too, man. All these women's purses and perfumes and styles and clothing. It's all branding. And if you have the right brands, you feel like you're a classy, elegant, powerful woman. And if you don't have the right brands, you feel cheap, okay? But what he's saying is, don't be fooled. You're buying brands because brands give you a false sense of power and ownership. And so you'll settle for brands because you don't have the real stuff, which is you don't really own your own land, your own house, your own property that's yours free and clear. So what the system does, it manipulates you for a second-rate counterfeit called brands. See, you'll run around with a $150 pair of Nike shoes, and that's a cheap substitute for a certain white man or of any race. You know, you'll have, I'm not knocking people's cars, but in LA, you know, if you have this brand name car or that brand name car or that brand name car, you can go to the right parties, you can park in the studio parking lots, and everybody thinks, you know, you've got it. But that's just a cheap way. You're buying a brand, okay? Doesn't mean you have any land, doesn't mean you have real wealth, doesn't mean you own your house free and clear. You just got a car with a brand on it. It's a counterfeit. This is a deep concept, man. He gets it. We want polo sporting Obama again. Now, I won't even explain that. That is so deep, so profound, and many of you know exactly what he's saying. Polo sporting Obama. We want a brand more than we want land. He's not being cute. He's talking about a biblical concept of economics that's very powerful. If you read your Old Testament, it's about land. It's about God, but it's about when God's people are serving him, guess what? They get the land. The land is very, very important, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's far more than you think it is. See, the currency you have in your wallet is worth nothing. Okay? It has no value except what they tell you the value is. You can't take $100 or $1,000 in paper money. You can't go to the bank and get gold for it or silver. You can't get anything for it except other paper currency. It's a con game. Paper currency is worth nothing but what they magically tell you it's worth. That's part of the slave system that began in ancient Babylon. That's what we talk about in our book, The Babylon Code. And he says it here. We want a brand more than we want land because we haven't known how it feels to actually have our own land and have ownership of our own blocks. So when you don't have ownership, then it's all about how something looks. This is important for young white people and white people of certain ages to hear and Hispanic people to hear. Even though he's speaking for African Americans, I'm telling you, young white people are in the same boat. Because young white people, many generations, have no identity. You understand that, right? Your kids have no identity. Where do they get their identity from? Who do they go when they go hear someone in concert? The rock and roll bands, they're all dead or dying off. Those days are gone. All the white kids are going to see African American hip hop and rap artists. The white kids all dress like they came from the ghetto. The white kids are wearing the same clothes that the African American kids were in the ghetto, the hip hop stars, the rap stars, and the same with the girls a lot of the time. Female contemporary African American artists. They're setting the trends because white kids don't have an identity anymore because the Judeo-Christian family structure has been smashed by the state. You understand what I'm talking about? This is talking about reality. I'm not talking about the phony stuff you hear in church that is disconnected from reality. I'm not talking about Easter egg Christianity. This is biblical Christianity. If you know how to apply what he's saying to the truth of the Bible, okay? And if you've listened to the Paul McGuire Report, then you know how to do that. Okay, now listen to this. He's talking about ownership. So when you don't have ownership, then it's all about how something looks. It's about the patina. It's not about the soul. And he's talking about the soul. It's not about the core, the inner man or the inner woman. I added that. So we focus more on, is somebody wearing something? Is someone disrespecting, so I got to shoot them? Or the idea of someone being a racist. You know, we talk about police murders, which we definitely have to discuss, but we have to bring nobility to the police officers and make the police officers are just like us. But there's the whole hate building, right? Do you understand why Kanye West is being attacked and assaulted by the entire mainstream media who are owned by the globalist elite? Do you understand why the Hollywood celebrities are attacking Kanye West and the Illuminati-controlled music celebrities are attacking Kanye West? Do you understand why the media and the internet is attacking Kanye West? Because Kanye West has broken the matrix. He's broken the psychological and spiritual chains of slavery. He's speaking on a higher level of consciousness. His depth of understanding is far more profound than pastors of seeker-friendly churches that are preaching neo-Marxism with Christian words, which brings people into slavery. Because seeker-friendly churches, which are preaching neo-Marxism and Christian words, are taking away people's ownership and people's right to own their own land. Man, your friends need to wake up. They are in such a hypnotic trance, they are clueless. They're calling this guy crazy. He's not crazy. He's growing wings and he's flying and he's free. Okay. Now, he's talking about the whole hate-building machine. And the whole hate-building machine that's designed to bring about racial tension. I can't read all of it. It's so profound. It's mind-blowing. Oh, this is interesting. Kanye West again. We have to open up the whole conversation. In other words, he's saying take it to a higher level. And so that's a move. That's just street talk, man. He's just getting to the point. One of the moves that I love that liberals try to do, the liberal would try to control a black person through the concept of racism because that they know that we are very proud, emotional people. So when I said I like Trump to like someone that's liberal, they'll say, oh, but he's a racist. Now listen to what Kanye West says. He just said that. I was quoting him, okay? He gets it, man. He gets it. He gets the fact that the elite in this nation are using scientific mind control to dominate African Americans by having them focus on racism. He's doing this. He's not talking about white people, but I'll talk about white people. The same game is being played on white people right now. Same game. Okay? And he's saying, you think racism can control me? This is Kanye West. Oh, that don't stop me. That's an invisible wall. Do you understand what he just said? He's saying, I am not going to allow myself to be controlled by liberals or by African Americans who are trying to call me a racism as a means to control my behavior and my actions. That's what he's saying. And then he's saying more than that. He's saying what Christians should say. He's saying those are invisible walls designed to control me. Some of you need to understand what invisible walls that are designed to control you means. He's saying, oh, that don't stop me. That's an invisible wall. He's saying what Christians should say. He's saying what Christians say, but Christians can't say it anymore because you're going to churches that are just like, your churches are like getting your head stuck in a waffle iron, man. No nutrition, and you're flat and you're tasteless. Listen to me. Invisible walls is a spiritual term, whether he meant it at that level or not. I think he meant it at that level. Invisible walls, the translation would be a stronghold, a satanically energized argument against us. That's what the Apostle Paul said. For our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against the powers, against the dark unseen forces of wickedness in heavenly places. The Apostle Paul also said, for the weapons of our warfare are mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. What are strongholds? Strongholds are invisible walls energized by Satan to block us from being who Christ wants us to become. He just said it. Oh, that doesn't stop me. That's an invisible wall. And the media is saying this guy is mentally ill. That's what they're saying. They're saying Kanye West is mentally ill. And they're apologizing for his stream of consciousness thought and saying the poor guy's mentally ill. He's got no brains. His brains have been fried on pharmaceutical drugs. They're saying they're calling Kanye West incoherent and crazy. Why? They're trying to demonize him. They're trying to make him look stupid. They're trying to make him look crazy and weird, just like they do Christians. Do you understand what I'm saying? The hidden agenda behind that is he is a threat to their control and domination of the African American. And therefore, they have two choices. They got to get rid of him. So they want to brainwash people into thinking he's a nutcase. Man, if you have half a brain, you can figure out this guy is not any nutcase. And they're doing the same thing with Christians, but Christians buy into it because you're not going to churches where they teach the Word of God, where they're on fire with the power of the Holy Spirit, and that they believe the Word of God. So you're always apologizing for everything God said. Why should you apologize for what God said? What's wrong with you? Either the theory of evolution is true or it's not true. If the theory of evolution is true, then you ought to burn your Bible and live like an atheist to the full the rest of your life. There's no pleasure that you should deprive yourself of, no matter how sinful, if the Bible's not true. Quit playing games, man. It's disgusting. Playing games is the biggest abomination before God there is. It's called sin. If the theory of evolution is true, and evolution simply means there is no God, we came here by accident, then, if that's true, which it isn't, by the way, but if it was true, then you should have the full right to live like a sinner any way, shape, form you choose, and forget about the consequences because there is no God. Quit playing games. Quit having your foot in both worlds. Either evolution's true or God's word is true. Now, God's word says the creator God of the universe, the biblical God, created both man and woman, and your life is here for a reason. That's what the biblical God says. And the biblical God says that you're going to die sooner or later, and then you're going to stand before the great white throne of judgment. If you have rejected my free offer of salvation by faith in Jesus Christ, you're going to spend all eternity in hell. And if you have accepted salvation by faith in Christ, you're going to spend all eternity in heaven. There's no middle ground. So which is it? Make your choice. Either you go with evolution, you go 100%, or you go with God and you go 100%. But you don't have a foot in both worlds, because it doesn't work. Okay. So, this guy is profound. Okay, we're gonna take a short break here. This is the Paul McGuire Report. Hopefully, we had 30 minutes of this program. I was recording on another system, which crashed on me. So I don't know if I can recover that today, but I want you to hear this. I want you to hear this program, and I want you to send it to people who need to hear it. Don't waste time sending it to somebody who's going to be upset because I'm quoting Kanye West. I mean, really, don't. The Bible says, don't cast your pearls before swine. No. Paul McGuire didn't say that. Well, let me give you a modern translation of don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't take the precious truth of God's word and give it to pigs. That's a contemporary translation. No. That's not Paul McGuire. That's God Almighty writing through His Holy Spirit, His inspired and inerrant Word of God. It was God who said, don't cast your pearls before swine, which means don't cast your precious truths, which are like gold and jewels, to pigs that won't recognize the value of what they've been given. So when you pray about who to send the program to, don't send it to pigs. Offended? Sorry, I'll say swine. Does it make you feel better? It's the same thing. Okay. Send it to the people that are hungry for God. And some of you know how to get a hold of Kanye West directly. Let him hear this. I believe he needs to hear messages like this. He needs to know that there's people out there that get, people who are not African American, that are not from the street, who get what he says and support it. That gives him power. Okay, because he's fighting a spiritual, I don't know where he is spiritually and theologically, but he's right in the middle of a spiritual battle. I do know this. Whatever his faults are or are not, he's on our front line fighting for truth. So get this to him and find a way for him to hear it. I think he will relate to it. Okay, go to paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. The goal of the Paul McGuire Report is to reach as many people as possible on a global level. The way we do that is we work together as one. We have to have prayer warriors and intercessors. You know what happens when you do like a program like this? You're going to end up fighting religious spirits, and they are the nastiest of spirits in the spiritual realm. That's why we need intercessory prayer warriors to pray for me, my family, and this ministry. We need those of you that know how to get around the walls of the internet, but also we need those of you who know how to get the programs that are right for the right people. You know how to get access to those people. Well, do an end run around the gates that is barricading the truth from them. Whether it's Kanye West or whatever, get the truth in the hands of the people that want it. And number 3 is, it costs money to use and continue to use the technology that will open up the areas for people we want to reach. So I thank God for each and every one of you that pray to the Lord and listen to what He says, and then whatever He says, no matter how radical, you do it, you obey Him. I'm thankful for all of you. Visit paulmcguire.us. By the way, we're having a Paradise Mountain Church meeting coming up soon, Thursday, October 25th, at the Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City. You need to be there. The meeting's free, the parking's free, but you got to pre-register at paulmcguire.us. Okay, so let me read this to you. And they beat Kanye West up. Every channel I turned on to for days, it's still going on. They're ripping him to shreds. They're calling him stupid. They're saying he's mentally deficient. They're saying he's got a mental illness. His brain, it doesn't work. He can't speak. What he said was just inarticulate, the speakings of a madman. They're lying about him. Do you understand that everything I just said that they said about him is a lie? I'm reading to you what he said. This is not the ramblings of a madman. They're demonizing him because he's speaking the truth. And on top of that, compared to what they talk about, they speak in white, polite English because they're in the media. But they don't have anything to say. They're not talking about big ideas. They don't talk about spiritual truths. All they do is generate anger and hatred and racism and conceal the truth, conceal the truth, conceal the truth, conceal the truth. They're a lying machine. Okay, so here we go. Listen to what Kanye West says. This is from Kanye West. I think he's saying this to the president. I answered your question. Now listen to what he says. I don't answer questions in simple sound bites. You are tasting a fine wine. It has multiple notes to it. The president laughs. You better play 4D chess with me like it's Minority Report, because it ain't that simple, it's complex. Now, I really want to focus in on that little statement that Kanye West said. He's bragging. He has a right to brag, because he is. He's with his words, he's talking on a genius level. Okay? Despite what the people, the dishonest drones of the media, the cyborgs, the androids, lifeless, soulless. He's saying, I don't answer questions in simple sound bites. That's what the media wants. Cute little tidy sound bites. You walk away with nothing. You definitely don't walk away with truth. Kanye West says, you are tasting a fine wine. I think it's perfectly appropriate when you're branding yourself, because every one of us have to brand ourselves. You say that's pride. The only reason you'd say that's pride is because you don't understand the difference between pride and humility. If you understood the Bible, you wouldn't say that's pride. No, you wouldn't. The fact that you don't understand the Bible is why you would say he's proud by saying you're tasting a fine wine. He's defending himself. He's being attacked. He's being minimized. He's being marginalized. He's being demonized. I think this is a very gentlemanly way and a very restrained way on his part to say, I'm not going to sell myself short. I view myself as a fine wine, not like some, cheap bottle of wine. Okay? I think this was a gentlemanly defense, because he's saying this in the framework of massive attacks on his personality, all based on lies. He is a fine wine. He's rare. And then he says this, it has multiple notes to it. What he's saying is true. In these so-called simplistic street jargon, ghetto-type statements, stream of consciousness statements that the media doesn't get, there's a complexity. There's a multi-dimensionality to Kanye West's statements. He's speaking way beyond the linear level. He has the sentence that you hear audibly playing through your head, but he's also has simultaneous refrains and sentences going off on different dimensions all at the same time. Like beautifully produced layered music with multiple soundtracks subtly added one upon another. He's speaking in the complexity of a layered effect with he says, multiple notes to it. He's talking about a multidimensionality in what he says. It's not just what you think he's saying that he's saying. He's saying what you don't think that he's saying that he's saying. That's genius. And then he says this, you better play 4D chess, four-dimensional chess with me. Again, brilliant. 4D chess means you're not just sitting there playing against the chess champion Bobby Fischer with a two-dimensional chessboard in front of you, where you have the flat chessboard, you have the chess pieces, and you're operating in just the dimensional world of playing chess. He's saying, we're playing chess, but we're playing it in the fourth dimension. That's the invisible world, the parallel universe. This guy is on top of it, okay? He's telling you, he's deliberately and intentionally, he's telling you without having to tell you that he's not crazy, that you may think he's a crazy, but he's a billionaire and a master of his game. But you're too dumb. I'm not talking about you, the listener of the Paul McGuire Report. I'm talking about the mass media out there. They're too dumb to get what he's doing. He's playing 4D chess with them. And then he says, like Minority Report. Well, Minority Report, the science fiction movie with Tom Cruise. He's saying, I'm communicating to you on a level that's futuristic and advanced. It's non-linear, like in the futuristic science fiction movie Minority Report. This guy's brilliant. Because it ain't that simple, it's complex. That's street talk, because it ain't that simple. Okay, we got it. It's complex. But in his narrative, there's a complexity. He's not some... You know how many airheads that I shared? I'm not talking about the hosts of one particular network. One particular network, the most powerful cable news network. The hosts were intelligent, gracious, and sharp. But I was on other networks where the so-called hosts and guest experts in economics and geopolitics that I was put on the air to debate with, who were essentially all airheads and didn't know anything. Okay? They wouldn't get what he's talking about. They only get simple. They don't get complex. They can't even tell you. I heard a discussion the other day, almost barfed. They ought to have read my book, The Day the Dollar Died. This economic expert, two of them, on a very big cable news network show, they had no idea what the Federal Reserve was about. They didn't understand that the Federal Reserve has nothing to do with the federal government. They didn't get the fact that the Federal Reserve is an independently owned foreign corporation which controls the U.S. monetary supply. They didn't understand that. Think about that. You can understand it, and if you don't, you're crazy. You need to get a copy of The Day the Dollar Died. This is the kind of stuff he's talking about. Then he says this. I mean, this is incredible. He talks about he's moving back to his hometown in Chicago. He says he's talking about the problems of Chicago. That there's 2.7 million people, I guess, living in the inner city of Chicago and 9 million in the surrounding suburbs. And then Kanye West is saying where we can create some factories. He says, I think it would be cool for them to be Trump factories because he's a master of industry. He's a builder. And I think it would be cool to have Yeezy ideation centers, which would be a mix of education that empowers people and gives them modern information. Like, sometimes people say, this is Kanye West's quote, this kid has ADD. This kid has ADD. You don't have ADD. School is boring. It was boring. It's not as exciting as this. We have to make it more exciting. We have to mix curriculums. You play basketball while you're doing math. You learn about music while you meditate in the morning. We have to instate mental health and art programs back into the city. Okay, I don't know about his spirituality. I don't know if he knows the difference between meditation and prayer, okay? But he is what he is, and he's doing what he can. Okay? Doesn't mean he can't grow, but look, unless people that he can relate to reach out to him, and that's one of the reasons I want you to, that you who know how to get a hold of Kanye West need to get this in his hands. I'd like to see him come to Christ. But look, listen to what he's saying. Every one of you that are mothers, fathers, and grandmothers of kids that have ADD or who have been diagnosed as having ADD, ADHD, bipolar, autism, obsessive-compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, and the whole list, I want you to pay attention very carefully. Later on in this interview, he talks about his diagnosis of mental illness and how he was wrongly diagnosed as having bipolar. He figured out after 16 years he didn't have bipolar. He had sleep deprivation because he went to the wrong doctor. Now listen to what he says. I want every single one of you who are the parents of kids that have been diagnosed with some kind of, quote, mental disorder to listen to what this guy's saying. He's talking about the experts. This kid has ADD. I'm quoting Kanye West. This kid has ADD. He don't have ADD. School is boring. It was boring. It's not exciting as this. We have to make it more exciting. We have to mix curriculums. You play basketball while you're doing math. You learn about music while you meditate in the morning. Okay, let me break down what I think he's saying, if I may. He's saying, you need to hear this. If you're the parent or grandparent or friend of somebody who's been diagnosed with one of these so-called mental disorders, listen carefully. This is about how you set people free. People can't be free when they've been labeled that they have a deficit. Are you hearing what I'm saying? If you've been told since you were an infant that you have attention deficit disorder, ADD, what you've been told loud and clear is that Johnny, Susie, you have attention deficit disorder. You have a deficit, that means there's something wrong with you, and you're not made right. You have a disorder. Talk about smashing a kid's self-image to little pieces. You're labeling the kid. You're speaking into the kid's God-given consciousness and soul that they have a deficit and they have a disorder. You're telling the kid, there's something wrong with you. You're broken. You're broken. There's something wrong with you. You're not right. That's what they're hearing. They're not hearing ADD. They're hearing what ADD means. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think in the eyes of God, not in the ideas of some expert that they change their mind every 5 years, do you think that these kids actually have a disorder or a deficit? Now, I want you to allow the Lord to reframe your mind right now. Do they have a deficit and a disorder? Or do they have what I would like to call, I don't call it attention deficit disorder. I call it attention asset benefit. You understand what I'm saying? They don't have a deficit. They have a bonus. They have an enhancement. They have extra. So you gotta reframe the three words. They don't have a deficit. They have a benefit. Attention benefit, not disorder. Higher level order. So you got to change whatever little 3-letter word you're going to label their soul with. Stop lying to them. They don't have a deficit. You have a deficit. You're too stupid to realize that God gave them hidden talents and abilities that are actually blessings in disguise. You've got the deficit, you moron. I'm not talking about you, the listener of the Paul McGuire Report. I'm talking about society. I'm talking about the media. I'm talking about the educators, the school teachers, and the experts, and the doctors, and the physicians that criminally have abused these kids psychologically by branding them with a lie that they have a deficit and a disorder. No, they don't have a deficit and disorder. The experts, not you, the listeners of the Paul McGuire Report, the experts have the disorder and the deficit. They're too stupid to realize the kid has been born with an asset, a benefit, an enhancement. You say, what are you talking about? If you bothered to read history, you'd know what I'm talking about. Read the biography. Watch, I think it's the History Channel or one of those channels, Netflix or something, one of them. Watch the thing. There was this recent series on television about Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was labeled mentally retarded when he was a kid. Albert Einstein was not allowed to attend any school. Albert Einstein was forced by the educators and experts that he was a total loser, that he was mentally ill, that he was mentally retarded. A professor at some major university wrote a letter saying this man is unfit to go to any university. This is Albert Einstein, okay? Now listen carefully. They didn't use the word ADD back when Albert Einstein was a kid, but I guarantee you, if Albert Einstein was alive today, they would say he has ADD or ADHD and other things. Got it? Listen real carefully. All the experts, the medical experts, the educational experts, told Einstein and his parents that he had a deficit, he was broken, he was retarded, and he didn't have a brain, basically. Well, guess what happens? Time passes, and it turns out that Albert Einstein not only didn't have a deficit, a disorder, or a retardation problem, he had a brain that was so superior, that was so intelligent, that it defied the norms of his day. He had an enhancement brain. And so he was able to, almost like a cosmic download, compute, work out mathematical and equations and physics that changed human history forever. But he didn't think in the dumbed down modality of his peers. You got it? So all the experts are saying to Albert Einstein, if they were using today's language, give this kid, shoot him up with drugs. Give him pills, because Albert Einstein, has got a deficit and a disorder. Not only did Albert Einstein not have a deficit and a disorder, his brain was so superior, that was the only reason he could come up with the mathematical and physics equations that changed our world forever. But you know, Albert Einstein's story is not singular. There have been hundreds of thousands of people in history who made the greatest discoveries, who were the greatest artists, the greatest writers, the greatest entrepreneurs. Some of the greatest people in history in their childhood were psychologically abused and tortured and told over and over again how retarded they were, how deficit they were, how their brains didn't work, how they would amount to nothing. They were told that constantly, and all of it was a lie. The truth of the matter is, there was a deficit problem in Einstein's life. There was a disorder problem in Einstein's life. And there was a retardation problem in Einstein's life. But it wasn't Albert Einstein's. The deficit, the retardation, the disorder was in the minds of the experts, the teachers, the educators, the scientists, the medical doctors that were all falsely evaluating him. They were too stupid to realize the genius that this guy had. Am I making my point clear? I hope I am. So if you accept that garbage and pass it on to your kids, I'm not going to finish the sentence. And I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not telling you what you should do and shouldn't do regards to certain medication. I'm not telling you off the top of my head to be a primitive and ignore nutrition, the potential of medication in certain situations. I'm not telling you to do that, so don't jump to a false conclusion that I never presented to you. You need to do your homework, first of all. That's going to cost you something. It's called education, and you can self-educate. As did Einstein, by the way, because they wouldn't accept him in school. Okay, so here we see a guy that everybody's calling mentally ill, Kanye West, saying, this kid has ADD. This kid has ADD. He don't have ADD. School is boring. It was boring. Do you understand that people who have exceptionally brilliant, gifted, creative superminds and geniuses find mundane, flatland, two-dimensional educational programs such as public school boring? And it drives them insane and crazy? And that's why they have hyperactivity. They can't sit still. It's to them the boredom, the stunning boredom and the monotony of a lifeless classroom is like the screeching of fingernails on a blackboard, and they react to it by hyperactivity and displaying ADD symptoms. Not because they're stupid, not because they can't pay attention. It's because the God-given filters in their brain actually work, and their brain tunes out the mundane, the stupid, the mediocrity, and the brainwashing. Do you understand that? I hope you do. Or you're going to raise one miserable kid. So he gets it. School is not exciting in this. Whoever came up with the idea that school and education should not be exciting? They ought to be arrested and thrown in prison. I heard that all my whole life. Well, school isn't supposed to be exciting. You just need to buckle down. No, I find learning the biggest high in the world. I find self-education the biggest rush, the biggest turn on, the most exciting thing a person could experience. It puts me into orbit. What drives me crazy is people who take what's fascinating, miraculous, wondrous, and turn it into boredom. That's what Kanye West is talking about. The problem isn't with the kid. The problem is with the idiot educational system that takes things that are wondrous and reduces them to monotony and excruciating boredom. Do you know excruciating boredom, physiologically and psychologically, for a lot of people, is like having somebody take a hammer and smash your fingernails over and over again on your hand? Do you know that excruciating boredom and monotony to a mind that is alive and fully running is as painful as somebody taking a hammer and smashing your fingernails? And then you expect the kid to sit there. And since the kid's not sitting there, you drug him into oblivion. Well, I can understand why. Because your son or daughter's not putting up with somebody taking a hammer to their fingernails and smashing their fingernails into little pieces. Why aren't they being compliant and orderly? Because the pain is excruciating. Do you understand what Kanye West is saying? Now, he says meditate. That's because probably nobody reached him with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay, we could talk about more. This is going to be part one. I hope I can resurrect an intro I did. I want to talk to you later about Kanye West, how he was misdiagnosed. I'm laughing, it's tragic. Because I think of all the people who've been misdiagnosed. He was told at a young age that he had bipolar. I'm sure he was medicated, treated as if he had bipolar. I'm sure the expectations authority figures had for him were based on the false diagnosis of him being bipolar. But the reality is he never had bipolar. He went to a different doctor who told him you were sleep deprived. So on the second part of this program, we're going to talk about where his IQ really was. And it was up there, man. It was up there. And we're going to talk about stuff that will set you free. Because you see, what's underneath all of this is the fact that a guy, I don't know, if he knows the Lord. I really don't know if he knows the Lord. But a guy, you know what prompted this? I saw the mass media attack this guy like vicious, rabid dogs. And they went after him, and they went after him, and they went after him. Yeah, all the friendly faces on CNN and MSNBC, even some of the people on Fox, I could name the names. They went after. I didn't even hardly knew who Kanye West was, for crying out loud. I don't care if I know his song. I don't know if I know his song. Do I ever watch the Kardashians? Once in a blue moon, which means once every 5 years, I might catch something here or there for a minute or two. This is not even the world that I connect to. But I saw him being viciously attacked. And I saw this other woman who, again, may very well have been molested or something, but certainly not by the person she accused of doing it. And I saw some really sneaky darkness going on when I did the research. Sneaky darkness. And I saw the woman praise this woman and go out of their way to be sensitive to her psychological issues. They were so respectful, so nurturing, so polite, because she was acting as an agent, a weapon for what they want destroyed. Then this guy was just trying to tell the truth. I don't think he's trying to be a weapon for anything, but he's definitely interfering with the mind control agenda. And they went after him viciously. So I'm doing this program to defend the guy. I don't even hardly know anything about him, except that he's worth the defense because he represents the plight of many other people. Think about it. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.